So what is the foundation for building a great enterprise? Here's a building that I built one time that had over $1 million. It's a small building, 10,000 square feet, had over $1 million in the earth, where it's just drilling piers, putting rebar in, filling the rebar with concrete, mixing it around, $1 million, and then you cover it all up and you never see it again. It's like it's not there. The house would look exactly the same if you didn't have this foundation there until the earth shakes, until something happens. So I was trying to think about what is it about great companies where they have these foundational piers that are drilled all the way to bedrock, where they become durable, where the company becomes enduring. And can we teach people how to build durable enterprises? And by the way, for those of you who aren't thinking about doing that necessarily, it's the same as true for durable families, for durable relationships, for anything that's enduring in life. You want to figure out what are the foundational elements. So, so here were the 4 that I came up with. The first one is you've got to build trust, establish a mission, assemble a team, and execute plans. If you do those 4 things to perfection, you're going to be able to build a building that will withstand anything. So I'm just going to do a quick tour of each of them. And again, I invite you to interrupt. But trust is basically, a lot of people think of trust as this fuzzy feel-good thing. It's a lot more than that. Trust is a really hard-edged concept. It is a leader's most potent currency and the strongest glue. If any of you ever end up in a turnaround, and I've done a couple of turnarounds, trust is what gets you through it. It's trust with suppliers, trust with creditors, trust with your employees. Trust, if they trust you to do what you say you're going to do, you will actually survive. And if there's no trust, you're short-lived. It will end quickly. So trust has these 3 conditions. And I've written this book, The 10 Laws of Trust. Gene has some copies of it. And for those of you who come to the Q&A session, anybody who asks a question, we'll give you a copy of it. But fundamentally, it's a function of not feel good, but character, competence, and then the authority to deliver on it. So if you'll start thinking about trust in those ways, you won't make mistakes. You won't be trusting people you shouldn't trust. The way I learned this was by trusting people I shouldn't trust. I ended up betrayed. And so I said, I've got to figure trust out. So trust, I kind of look at cultures as either being driven by power or by trust. And so you have a kind of a probability distribution around it. And if you think about the most power-driven culture in our society today, I think it's the U.S. Congress. It's totally driven by power. People punish enemies and reward friends. They don't trust each other. And so it's a hostile environment. Very little gets done. Whereas if you end up in organizations where they're high trust, everything goes more quickly, agreements are more durable. So there's a real tension here in this. And so to me, I wanted to put together this thing called the 10 Laws of Trust, which says there are ways that you can increase the likelihood of having a high trust organization. There are laws. And if you follow these laws, you can end up with higher trust. And so when we did the second edition of it, we put in a diagnostic where you can test your organization, ask a question about each of these laws, and come up with a score, and then look at how your score either increases or decreases over time. So the first thing that you have to do, though, if you want to build a high-trust organization, is you have to become trustworthy yourself. There's no point in thinking you'll have a high-trust organization if you yourself are not trustworthy. Being trustworthy means you deliver on promises. And to me, delivering on promises is derivative of your core values. Your core values are what matters most to you. Think about where you spend your time, your money, and your mind share. And those are your values. I don't care what you say or what you say in church or what you put on the wall about integrity or anything else. Where you spend your time, your money, and your mind share are your core values. And so if you're not true to those, you're not going to be trusted. And then ultimately, you have to own your own operating system. Those of you, and I've done it myself, who either say, well, the devil made me do it, or I'm just that way, or I can't help it, my emotions, just overtook me or whatever. You don't own your operating system. And I would challenge you, if you want to build a high trust organization to own your operating system. And you can do that, and I give an example in the book of how you can do that. And then you have to build a high trust brand or culture within the organization. And so there are a number of ways to do that. The second thing is to establish a mission. By the way, that sounds really easy. How many of you have seen these mission statements on the walls of companies or maybe schools or whatever? Everybody has a mission statement. Most of those create cynicism in the organization. Why? Because people don't live them. They say one thing, post it on the wall, frame it, and then they live another way. So the key is to have a mission that is consistent with what people do, what they really think and feel. And the only way I've learned to do that is to make sure that everybody owns it by helping to create it. And I've often said that the way you build a high-trust organization is showing people respect on a winning team doing something meaningful. If you can hit those three notes, respect, winning, and meaning, you'll be on your way to establishing a mission. My favorites, so this is the book that's coming out. It's available 2020, can be pre-ordered. That's the last ad you'll see. So here's what I was thinking about is using this example of the five-tool player. I don't know if there are any baseball aficionados in here. Does anybody know what the five-tool player does? This is how the scouts always used to pick the best prospects. They had 5 tools. So you don't know what treasures are, and you don't know what 5-tool players are. Yeah.
Well, someone who has all the tools, so power, speed, on-base percentage or average, and I can't think of those right now. But basically, a 5-tool player is someone who is proficient in every skill.
Yeah, and all of the key skills that you need for you to start. So this is, does anybody know who this is? Willie Mays. We got somebody. Willie Mays is probably the greatest 5-tool player in the history of baseball. And you're close on what they were, but you can run, throw, field, hit for power, and hit for average. So those are the things. So I was thinking about what are the 5 skills for the entrepreneurial leader? Not the entrepreneur, but the entrepreneurial leader. Does anybody know who this guy is? You can read the Ford sign there. He's Alan Mulally. Alan Mulally was the head of Boeing and then was hired by Ford. Ford was the only auto company that didn't take a government bailout. So he's really a hero. You've all heard of Jack Welch, who just passed away, was the head of GE, was considered the best manager of the latter part of the 20th century. Alan Mulally replaced Jack Welch. Alan Mulally, I think, is the 5-skill player, the entrepreneurial leader. Well, who would think of an entrepreneurial leader being the head of Boeing and Ford? I mean, that doesn't sound like an entrepreneurial leader, but if you really break it down, fundamentally they're able to innovate, they can preside, they can lead a group, they can administrate, and then they are politicians. They've got all of these skills. You know, a lot of times the problems with entrepreneurs is they know how to light fires, but they don't know how to keep them burning. And so the entrepreneurial leader who's going to build an enduring enterprise is able to do all of this. So establishing a mission then, I hope you recognize this guy, Winston Churchill. But he was, when the Germans crossed the Meuse River in May of 1940, he replaced Neville Chamberlain as the head of the government. And he gave a speech to the House of Commons. It was very short. Chamberlain gave a long speech and was warmly applauded and everything. He was the one that was, you know, we have peace in our time, and it was appeasing Hitler. Churchill came in and said, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And in this one sentence with 42 words, you can see what his was. I mean, I've highlighted it here just in case you didn't pick it up. But what was his mission? What was his goal? His goal was victory. So when you see Hitler doing this, or when you see Churchill doing this, it's not, we're in the Second World War. It's victory. He was all about victory. So when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, he came over and spoke to Congress. And the following week, he went up to Canada to speak to Parliament. And Youssef Karsh, who is an Armenian-Canadian photographer, was asked to take his picture, and this was the picture that he took, which is you've never seen before. This is the one that you've seen. It's the most iconic photograph of World War II. And the way he got that picture was by grabbing Churchill's cigar from him. And at the moment he grabbed the cigar, Churchill leaned forward and glowered. He snapped the shot and got it. Well, Churchill was the embodiment of never giving up. Never, 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 never give up. And it saw us through World War II, Western civilization. So establishing a mission is fundamentally, I've defined it as, winning, finding meaning, setting mad goals. Mad goals to me are ones that are memorable. If you can't remember it, there's no point in having a common goal if people can't recite it. By the way, if you were to do a survey of most executives of the goals of their company, you'd find that there's no agreement. They don't know what they are. My experience is you can't build an enduring enterprise unless the whole team knows exactly what they're solving for and are measuring it. So they're memorable, they're aligned, and they're doable. They're something that can be achieved. Otherwise, they're just wishes. And then finally, it's building alignment. So every system in the organization then is aligned behind the goals. So fundamentally, they're consistent with your values, your objectives, your strategy supports your objectives, your tactics support your strategy, and what you measure supports what your tactics are. So fundamentally, that's how you establish a mission and achieve it. Here's some examples of missions that you probably recognize. Some of them you recognize, but it makes a difference. And it really helps to wordsmith it. People will argue over words. I had an interesting experience with my youngest child. She was applying to school, and one of the questions was, what 5 words best describe you? And think about that sometime. And by the way, I'd encourage you to do that, to think about the brand you would like to have in your life. Think about the 5 words you'd like to have. But in this discussion with her, we talked about, is she stubborn or is she determined? And with every one of these words, we had to figure out the nuance between those. And that's really, when you're establishing a mission that will propel you to become enduring, the words matter. There was an American playwright by the name of Tom Stoppard who said, words are precious. If you choose the right ones and put them in the right order, you can nudge the world a little bit. You can nudge a company a little bit if you get the right words in the right order and get everybody owning it and agreeing to it. So then the third thing is to assemble a team. I know you've studied this in business school, in business school here. I'm just going to say, hiring great people is only part of it. And I find that hiring great people means, first of all, sourcing a lot of potentially really great people. And then it's the process that you go through that has your whole team interviewing them with purpose, sharing that. It means onboarding them properly. It means coaching them along the way. It means all these things that is the only way that you're going to have a great team. And I think learning how to give feedback, I think having a culture of feedback where nothing is left unsaid. One of the things I used to do was ask people right after a meeting to say, how did it go? And I would start out by saying, I think I did this mistake. I could have done this, that, or the other better. So people would see me criticizing myself. And as they saw that, they felt like, well, it's okay for me to say, here's what I didn't do well. And pretty soon it became fun to give each other feedback and get better. We're getting better. So coaching and feedback is that part. And then firing with empathy. It's funny, I had the associate editor of the Harvard Business Review help ghostwrite this last book. And at the end of it, he said, there's a chapter that we would like to tweak and put in as an article, Harvard Business Review article, and it was the chapter on firing, which I don't really like being known as the guy for firing, but I'm becoming known a little bit for that. But it's at least called firing with empathy, but you've got to do it. You cannot have the best team on the field if you don't fire them, if you don't remove them. If you let them build up as deadwood somewhere else in the organization, you'll create a bad organization that will not be enduring. So you have to fire. You have to learn how to do that. And then finally, the last thing is executing to perfection. I have a model for execution that I think works. does for me. I break down execution steps into projects. What is the project? And I always like to have a champion, deliverables, a timetable, and a budget. And every, whatever the board meeting rhythm is, or the management meeting rhythm, have a report that is red, yellow, green. And so I can see every one of the projects and where they stand. Alan Mulally, when he was running Ford, he said he had the red, yellow, green thing. And for the first little while, every single report was green. Everybody was green. And finally, somebody put a red in on one of the deliverables, and he applauded. He just stood up and applauded. And pretty soon, other people started reporting on yellows and reds, and they would celebrate these things because they were really getting at the delivery. So managing plans and executing is really the last thing that you, if you don't do that well, forget about all the others. So then I'm going to go through the topics that if you're going to be an entrepreneurial leader, somebody who creates durable change, who creates a great enterprise, there are 10 things that you're going to run into. And this book is kind of a recipe, a set of recipes. How do you handle each of these? So the first one you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make decisions under conditions of uncertainty. You will never have enough information to make the perfect decision. In fact, people who wait until they have the perfect information have already made a decision. It's just that it won't work out for them. So you have to pull the trigger before you're ready. And you have to have they used to say that wisdom and judgment is the ability to predict the future. And so that's what you've done. I'm just going to run through these really quickly. I'm getting the sign. You have to know how to sell. No business survives without a revenue line. MBAs don't like to think they're going to go out and sell. I would say get a job selling if you want to learn how to do this. You're going to have to negotiate. Many people don't like negotiation. Negotiations are just solving for problems. You have to know how to raise capital. You have to communicate lavishly before, during, and after events, bad news as well as good news. You have to know how to run efficient meetings. Most people hate meetings, and they hate them for good reasons. They're really right to hate them. You have to know how to use a board effectively. I've seen boards advance companies and boards destroy companies, and largely it's a function of how effective the leadership team is. You have to be able to overcome adversity. It will happen. If you don't believe it, look at this virus today. So the airlines that are going to survive this are the ones that are the best run. There's one big one that is likely to lose it over that. You have to know how to survive growth, which can be as challenging as adversity, and then you have to know how to drive change. So in effect, those are the 10 things you've got to be able to do well. You've got to have these piers drilled. These are grade beams that connect them, and then you can build all the way from an idea to a product, service, to a profitable business, to enduring companies. Thank you.